Speaker, I rise to speak on the Energy Legislation, Electricity, Outage, Emergency Response and Other Matters Bill 2023. Acting Speaker, power and electricity fuels the aspirations of modern day life. From the moment we wake up in the morning to the sound of that iPhone alarm, to when we make breakfast, to when we go to the workplace or the classroom and turn on the respective tools we need to be productive, the correlation between energy and socio-economic progress has long been established and is now very much woven into virtually every aspect of our lives. However, before I turn to the substance of this bill, which will help improve energy certainty and security in times of need for Victorians, I think it's important to just provide some global context to the fact that as we stand in this chamber tonight, many across the globe still sadly do not have access to even the most basic energy and electricity supply. According to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the lack of access to energy globally continues to be a major handbrake on economic and human development. Access to clean and affordable power is essential to the development of agriculture, business, communications, education, healthcare and transportation, with the UN highlighting that access to energy is fundamental to preventing diseases, supplying clean water and improving basic hygiene. However, as of 2020, it was estimated that 730 million people around the globe had no access to electricity, predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, with that number only anticipated to reduce to 679 million by 2030. Across the Pacific, energy poverty has been identified predominantly across 3 countries, including Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands and Vanuatu, with around 7 million Pacific Islanders estimated to have essentially no access to electricity. So while we in this chamber may regularly disagree on many things, I think it's fair to say that we in Australia and Victoria have long been overwhelmingly fortunate beneficiaries of the reliable and secure supply of energy to our homes and our communities that millions of others around the globe can sadly remain envious of. However, Acting Speaker, while Victorians have enjoyed extended phases of uninterrupted power supply over many respective periods, over the last 15 years there have indeed been many instances where we have had electricity supply seriously disrupted and community safety compromised, including through the tragic 2009 Black Saturday bushfires and the 2019-20 Victoria fire season. While these and other events were subject to respective post-event reviews and commissions instituted by the Commonwealth and Victorian governments, which put forward recommendations to build a better and more resilient, enhanced state power system, it was the more recent severe storms experienced by Victorians in June 2021 and October 2021 that has led to the reforms set out in this bill. Speaker, the storms of June and October 2021 caused devastating impacts, as we have heard throughout the chamber and through the various contributions here today, with many left without power for prolonged periods. And as outlined by the Electricity Distribution Network Resilience Review, which was prompted following the June 2021 storms, at their peak, more than 297,000 customers lost power, 68,000 electricity customers remained off supply after 72 hours, and 9,000 customers were still without power 7 days after the event. As identified by SES Victoria, the June storms of 2021 impacted many Victorian communities, but in particular those in the Dandenong Ranges, as we heard from the member for Mumbolk, the Macedon Ranges, Latrobe Valley, Hepburn Shire and many other parts of the state. The result was over 10,000 requests for assistance to Victoria SES with widespread power outages of essential services. Following the October 2021 storms, at their peak, over 526,000 customers lost power, 23,900 customers remained off supply for 72 hours later, and just over 2,500 customers were still without power 7 days after the event. The October storms also caused significant impacts across the state, including Mount William in the Grampians, Melbourne Airport and throughout Melbourne's northern suburbs, as well as even in St Kilda. The Electricity Distribution Network Resilience Review, page 6, which I'd like to refer the House to, identified a wide number of issues experienced by communities as a result of the storms. And I quote, "The review heard from affected residents and whole communities that a key problem was the loss of all phone and internet communications due to these systems having limited redundancy to prolonged power outages. Many were unable to contact services or family or friends to check on welfare, request assistance or receive updates from distribution businesses. In cold winter conditions, prolonged loss of power affected people's ability to heat homes and keep warm, prepare food, shower and wash clothes. Refrigerated food supplies were even lost. For the elderly and those with disabilities and those with young families, those impacts were exacerbated even more. For businesses and those residents working from home during the COVID-19 lockdown, the lack of access to the internet was a significant issue. Some residents and businesses also lost access to water and sewage services. A significant frustration for many was receiving insufficient information from distribution businesses on which to base a decision about whether to stay or leave. Many said that information was only being provided via communication systems that had themselves been significantly disrupted. The updates that distribution businesses did provide were often inaccurate and unhelpful, with estimated time to restore power messages being clearly unrealistic and changing frequently through the duration of the outages. People understood that the extent of the damage meant it was a very difficult situation for the distribution businesses and greatly appreciated the efforts of the field staff. However, there was a widespread sense of disappointment and even dismay about the poor quality of information provided by the distribution businesses' head offices and the dysfunctional internal systems they appeared to be employing. This resulted in the need for repeated reporting and further delays and inconvenience. Overall, the widespread experience of these communities, both during and outside of the extreme events, in seeking to interact with their distribution businesses was opaque, unsatisfying and disempowering. Acting Speaker, the severe windstorms of June and October 2021 highlighted the vulnerability of our electricity distribution network and the impacts that such extreme weather events have on local communities and businesses. The review found that electricity distribution businesses failed to provide timely and fit-for-purpose information on request by the former Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. Additionally, the review highlighted that electricity distribution businesses did not provide effective support in the delivery of relief activities for impacted communities. Speaker, the objective of this bill is to directly facilitate the implementation of a key reform recommended by the Electricity Distribution Network Resilience Review. The bill will achieve this by amending the following acts, including the Electricity Industry Act of 2000 to provide the Secretary of DECA with a directions power to compel electricity distribution businesses to assist in emergency response and recovery, either through the provision of information for emergency operations and/or assisting with relief programs to reduce the impacts of electricity customers of prolonged power outages caused by severe weather events and help improve community resilience. And the Essential Services Commission Act of 2001 and the Victorian Energy Efficiency Target Act of 2007 through minor amendments to support reforms to the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program compliance and enforcement regime. Speaker, providing the Secretary of DECA with a new power to direct electricity distribution businesses where there is an emergency power outage may compel electricity distribution businesses to provide information to the Secretary to assist in the emergency management operations. As part of this, a direction may compel electricity distribution businesses to support and administer relief programs and payments to their impacted customers during and following a prolonged power outage. Failure to comply with the direction could attract a civil penalty of more than $200,000, reflecting how serious the impacts of non-compliance can be for affected customers. In amending the Victorian Energy Efficiency Act and the Essential Services Commissions Act of 2001 and 2007 respectively, the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program will be further strengthened to deliver cost-saving outcomes to Victorian customers and align the program's effectiveness in lowering greenhouse gas emissions from continued use of the legacy equipment in Victorian households and businesses. But Acting Speaker, while these reforms will go some way to improving resilience of our state's electricity network in the event of storms and emergencies, the reality is combating climate change will remain crucial if we are to mitigate against the worst impacts and prevent more severe weather events. As stated by the Electricity Distribution Network Resilience Review on page 21, historic planning practices have delivered networks that can withstand the typical historical climate conditions. However, climate change has increased the incidence, nature and severity of extreme weather events and natural hazards. We can expect climate change to make weather-driven events such as those experienced in June and October of 2021 storms more frequent and more severe. At the heart of this urgency is a need to acknowledge the increased likelihood of extreme weather events. The incidence of major wind and storm events such as those that occurred in June and October 21 is expected to increase with climate change and therefore increase the likelihood of disruption to power and energy sources. We agree, that is the review, that the frequency and severity of these events is expected to increase. Further, our collective dependency on our critical infrastructure has increased. With changes to how and where we work meaning we are more dependent on a safe and resilient power supply than ever before. These are the views that were put forward to the review by key stakeholders including the Australian Energy Regulator, the CSIRO, the Yarra Ranges Council, Ausgrid, City Power and many, many others. Acting Speaker, that is why, along with the measures contained in this bill, the Andrews Labor government's commitment, and I note the Minister is at the table here for climate action, we are taking real action on climate change to radically reduce our carbon emissions, which is fundamentally critical, including through bringing back the SEC, which will be a key driver to reducing emissions and bringing down power bills through the $1 billion initial investment into renewable government-owned energy. Later this year, the government will legislate these emissions targets of 75 to 80% by 2035 and net zero by 2045. Working towards a target of 95% renewable energy generation by 2035, a renewable energy storage target of 6.3 gigawatts by 2035, and offshore wind energy targets will also enable the state to make this historic transition. Acting Speaker, I commend this bill to the House. It's all about protecting communities, securing our energy supply, and I look forward to its passage.